Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. Today I want to do a small little book haul. Now, I must admit that I'm a little concerned about participating in the book haul wars that appear to be spreading throughout the Booktube community. Before I get started, let me mention that perhaps a month ago, when Steve Donoghue made his own first volley into the haul wars, he mentioned that another booktuber had laughed at him for supposedly having low T. So I thought I would start by showing you right off the bat that personally I have high T. Okay, let me get on with the bookish part. To be honest, I have collected an enormous number of used books from local used bookstores and even more so from the amazing little free libraries in my neighborhood, a neighborhood with a bunch of English and history professors from local colleges. I even have a whole stack of books acquired at the Brattle Bookshop in Boston last time I was up there. But today, I want to talk about a few books I bought at one of my local independent bookshops recently, a used bookstore in Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. As many of you, I'm sure, know, Saturday was Independent Bookstore Day, so it seems like a great time to show you my recent local haul. The first book I picked up is one I've been hoping to find for at least a few years, and that is The Chamomile Lawn by Mary Wesley. The story starts in the summer of 1939 in Britain when a set of cousins have gathered at their aunt's house for a holiday. This is the summer that, as the jacket copy says, is the end of innocence. These years, right before World War II, changed their lives, where conflict and violence enter their lives in a variety of ways. The novel, as a whole, traces the cousins' interactions over the years, including at the funeral of one of the group a few decades later. From what I hear, this is a book about loss, and one that is both nostalgic in some ways and much darker in other ways. The second book I want to mention is the 20th century writer from the U.S. South, the novelist Elizabeth Spencer. But this isn't one of her novels. I found a copy of Spencer's memoir, Landscapes of the Heart, where she talks about her childhood in small town Mississippi, her education afterwards at the Southern University Vanderbilt, and also her travels around the world, and how she came to split from traditional white Southern ideas about racial segregation to work for an integrated society. Despite her move away from Mississippi and her move away from the racial discrimination she was exposed to growing up, she remained deeply connected to the South, to the physical and cultural impact of that region on her work. In this memoir, she also talks about her friendships and her intellectual gratitude to a diversity of writers she knew, from John Cheever to Saul Bellow, from Robert Penn Warren to Eudora Welty. And speaking of Eudora Welty, I picked up a couple of books about this great 20th century Southern writer who wrote some of my very favorite short stories. The first book is called Eudora Welty, Critical Essays, and is edited by Peggy Prenshaw. This thick book came out in 1979, I think, and is full of essays by a bunch of different literary scholars. Some are about specific themes or particular stories, some are about her novels, and some look at other aspects of her life, from her photography early in her life to her memoir and her criticism. I'm especially intrigued to read Chester Eisinger's piece considering the ways in which Welty writes within a traditionalist strain and the way she embraces modernism. This might be a little premature, but I've been thinking about what I want to do for this year's Hannah's Bookica, my 8-night Booktube posting extravaganza in December, marking Hanukkah, which is my answer to Vlogmas. This past year, I did a lot of tags and the like. The time before, I did an intense read of some of the work of and about Willa Cather. This coming holiday, I might focus on a deep dive into some of the work of Eudora Welty. We'll see. So the next book I picked up is also a collection of essays about Eudora Welty called Eudora Welty and Mystery, Hidden in Plain Sight, edited by Jacob Agner and Harriet Pollack. This book is quite a bit newer than the previous edition, published in 2023, I think. It explores how Welty played with the themes and tropes of the genres of mystery, crime, and detective fiction. According to the jacket copy, Welty was one of fiction's greatest double agents. Okay, this one is a little bit different. It's the classic book, Literary Women, The Great Writers by Ellen Moers, originally published in the 70s, I'm pretty sure. I know I owned a copy of this book decades ago, but I am excited to read it again after all these years. Let me read the description on the back. Jane Austen, George Sand, Colette, Simone Weil, and Virginia Woolf all drew their material from the distinctly feminine aspects of the human condition and have transformed it into literature. How did their femininity influence their work? Is women's literature distinct from men's? Literary Women records what it's meant to the major women writers to be both women and writers. One of the pioneering works of feminist criticism, it separates women from the mainstream of literary history and examines how the fact that they were women influenced both their lives and their writing. Half the book addresses a general topic that Moers calls heroinism. This phrase and the paragraph I read you might make it clear to you that the perspectives of feminist scholarship have developed and changed over time. But this book was quite formative for the field. A significant majority of authors Moers discusses were writing in the UK, the US, or France, although there are a few others included as well, as I remember it. If any of you are excited about Rebecca Romney's new book, Jane Austen's Bookshelf, you might find some of Moers' book interesting too. Finally, I want to mention one book that I didn't buy at the used bookstore, but picked up at a little free library on my walk home. A book published in 2022 called Hotbed, Bohemian Greenwich Village and the Secret Club that Sparked Modern Feminism by Joanna Scutts. The club she's writing about is the Heterodoxy Club in the early 1900s in New York City. I think I've mentioned heterodoxy a time or two before on this channel, maybe when I was talking about Willa Cather. At any rate, the members of this group were supporters of what was a brand new philosophy, that women were fully human and should be equal to men. That movement was, of course, feminism. The Heterodoxy Club participated in a variety of radical politics, not just feminism, including the fights for both suffrage and birth control, but also organized labor, anti-racism, pacifism, free love, etc. Heterodoxy accepted and supported lesbian members, and also members who at least sometimes chose to be gender nonconforming. Let me read you one of the brief clips. The relationships between women within heterodoxy occurred at a time of transition in American understandings of female same-sex intimacy. It is an interesting history. Basically, intimate same-sex relationships were not considered deviant in a lot of upper-class Victorian-era communities in the UK and in the US. But by the turn of the century, the idea that such relationships were perverse began to spread. Heterodoxy was just one place that was a bit of a safe haven. Sexuality per se is really not a major theme in this book, but the idea of close friendships between women is absolutely central to the text, partly because these friendships supported these women who were choosing to live fairly unconventional lives. Well, not bad at all. Presented in celebration of Independent Bookstore Day. Thank you so much for joining me today here on Hannah's Books. See you soon.